Today, we're diving into the story of the Sygnus Group. Now, this isn't just another financial firm. This is a company that looked at the Caribbean market and didn't just participate, it fundamentally re-engineered it. We're going to break down how they went from a tiny startup in 2016 to an absolute regional heavyweight.
Okay, so to really get what Sygnus is all about, we have to rewind the clock a bit. You first have to understand the massive, gaping problem in the Caribbean's financial world that they were built to solve.
For so many entrepreneurs across the region, this image of a locked door was their day-to-day reality. They had these amazing, growing, profitable businesses. But whenever they went to the traditional banks for capital to expand, that door was slammed shut. And the big, frustrating question was always, why?
Well, the answer comes down to this one crucial concept, the missing middle. Think about it. You had these solid, medium-sized companies, but they were stuck in a financial no-man's land. They were way too big for microloans, but for the giant commercial banks, they were seen as too small, too risky, or they just didn't have the kind of old-school collateral the banks wanted. They were literally being starved of the capital they needed to grow.
So you've got this huge hole in the market, right? What do? Well, this is where things get brilliant. A whole new model was architected. And this wasn't just about launching another fund. No, it was about building an entire investment ecosystem from scratch.
And the whole thing was driven by three industry insiders who knew exactly where the old system was failing. First, you have Beresford Gray, who we'll call the structurer. He was the guy who could put together the complex, creative deals that banks just wouldn't even look at. Then you've got Jason Morris, the strategist, the numbers guy, laser-focused on smart, risk-adjusted returns. And rounding them out, Dr. Ike Johnson, the operator, who brought the heavyweight academic and operational discipline to make the whole machine run smoothly.
And their entire philosophy, their DNA, was built on these three principles, the 3 I's. And each one was a direct shot at the old way of doing things. Innovation meant bringing financial tools that were common in New York or London right to the Caribbean. Independence was absolutely non-negotiable. They wanted to make investment decisions without the conflicts of interest that were so common elsewhere. And finally, integrity. This was the bedrock. They had to build trust from day one to convince the market that this new thing called private credit was for real.
So how did they actually structure it? Brilliantly. They created this manager funds model. Think of it like this. They put all the brains, the expertise, the deal makers, the advisory, into one company, the manager. Then they created separate buckets of money, the funds, which were these clean, pure-play investment companies. This meant investors knew exactly what they were buying into, whether it was credit or real estate, and all the expertise was centralized. It's a clean, simple, and globally respected setup.
And with that smart structure in place, they were able to build out 3 distinct but totally interconnected engines of growth. This was the core of their investment machine.
Okay, first up you have the flagship Sygnus Credit Investments, or SCI. This is the big one, the largest private credit company of its kind in the entire English-speaking Caribbean. And its mission? It's simple. Provide that flexible, creative financing directly to those missing middle companies we talked about.
And the way SCI grew was just so clever. They did a series of innovative capital raises. In 2018, they went public, which was huge because it let everyday retail investors get a piece of the private credit market. They even raised money right in the middle of the pandemic. But the real masterstroke was in 2025, when they secured permanent capital. That means they have a pool of money that doesn't have a deadline, giving them incredible stability and flexibility.
All right, now this is where the story gets really, really fascinating. If you looked at SCI's performance in 2025, you'd see a puzzle. On one hand, their total investment income was through the roof, up over 50%, an all-time record. But then you look at the other side, and net profit was down almost 30%. At first glance, it makes 0 sense.
I mean, it begs the question, right? How on earth is that possible? How can your business be bringing in more cash than ever, but you end up with less profit on the bottom line?
Well, the answer wasn't a problem with the business. Far from it. It was actually about being smart and prudent. See, with interest rates rising, they decided to set aside more cash to cover any potentially shaky loans. That's just good management. They also had to book some paper losses on the value of some assets. These are non-cash accounting rules. But here's the key. If you look at their core earnings power, the net investment income, it actually skyrocketed, up almost 90%. The engine was more powerful than ever.
Okay, on to engine number 2, Sygnus Real Estate Finance, or SRF. And let me be clear, this is not your typical sleepy real estate company.
They don't just buy a building and collect rent. They operate like a private equity firm for property. They get their hands dirty, developing, financing, and restructuring projects to squeeze out every drop of hidden value. And this table shows you exactly what that active, hands-on approach looks like. Their profits are what you'd call lumpy. It's not a steady trickle. It's driven by big one-off events, like when they sell a property or get a massive revaluation. Just look at that huge jump in 2021. That's the model. It's volatile by nature, but it can lead to some massive wins.
And that brings us to the third engine, Sygnus Investments, or SDI. This is their straight-up private equity arm. SDI buys direct ownership stakes in great companies across the region, and they focus on really resilient sectors. You've got tourism with Chukka, critical regional logistics with CSNT, and even defensive consumer brands like KFC in Panama.
Now, through all this growth, there was one single strategic move that stands head and shoulders above the rest, a deal that completely changed the game and transformed Sygnus's scale and ambition forever. And that was their leap into Puerto Rico.
So why Puerto Rico? I mean, this chart tells the whole story, doesn't it? It's all about scale. Look at the size of that economy, over $100 billion. It completely dwarfs their traditional markets. This move gave them access to a much bigger, much deeper playground, all operating under U.S. commercial law.
And did the bet pay off? Oh yeah, in a huge way. The company they bought, Acrecent, delivered almost $5 million in profit in 2025. This one move didn't just add a little to the bottom line, it effectively doubled the group's entire operational footprint. It was a massive home run. So by 2024, you can see the group starting to evolve again. The focus started to broaden, moving beyond just pure financial returns and towards tackling some of the biggest, most fundamental challenges facing the entire Caribbean region. And nothing shows this better than the Caribbean Community Resilience Fund. Here, they're partnering with huge development agencies like USAID to funnel private money into critical projects like renewable energy and sustainable housing. And get this, to have the IFC, that's the World Bank's private sector arm, propose a $15 million investment, that is a massive global stamp of approval. It tells the world's biggest investors that this is a serious, bankable strategy.
And looking forward, their next goal is crystal clear: $1 billion in assets under management. And that number isn't just for show. It's the magic number. It's the scale they need to get on the radar of the world's largest institutional investors, the ones who write the 9-figure checks that can truly transform the region.
So when you step back and look at the whole journey, it really boils down to this. In just a handful of years, Sygnus went from a radical idea to a core pillar of the Caribbean's financial world. They proved that a new way of funding growth wasn't just possible, it was absolutely essential.
Which really leaves us with this final, forward-looking question. Sygnus proved it could make money by filling a huge gap in the market. But can that same model now evolve to become one of the main engines for building a stronger, more sustainable, and more resilient Caribbean for the future? That truly is the billion-dollar question.